Welcome to our podcast. This is Real Talk with Mary Contrary and Starfish. All right, everybody, welcome back to our show. This is Mary Contrary and Starfish today, and we are continuing our talk about this massive 2020 Project 2025 document. So we are going to start with the education section of this document today. So we're going to give you guys an overview of who wrote it, where it came from in this episode, and then we'll do some further breakdowns in some of the other episodes. So Starfish, if you will take it away.
Yeah, so I started with this one because, as you all know, I'm an educator. I come from education. I come from higher education, though. So, of course, the Department of Education as K-12, as we talked about before, kindergarten through high school. So that's called secondary education. And I am my experience is in post-secondary education, but technically it's all wrapped up into the Department of Education. So I wanted to start with this chapter of this 922-page book because I thought, let me just start in a place I know and see whether I understand this. And the first thing I noticed was who wrote this? Who wrote this thing? Because I want to know, honestly, higher ed is not a huge community. There's only 1,000 institutions, I think, in the United States or something like that, maybe a few thousand at most. And so, especially in administration, presidents, leadership, and these roles, you have, a few hundred people running these. So like almost everywhere I've moved, I knew somebody that I worked with in another school or in another setting. It's just kind of a small world. So I thought, I wonder if I know this person or I've heard of her or anything, nothing like that. So I started with who wrote this, and the name of her is Lindsay Burke. So who's Lindsay Burke was my first question. So of course, the first thing I did was go straight to LinkedIn, because that's where in higher education, I don't know about other industries like healthcare that you're in, we use LinkedIn. So we put all of our stuff on there. We recommend each other. We become connections with each other. And so if you're not on LinkedIn in higher ed and you're like this level, I would be suspicious. So she does have a LinkedIn account at least. And what I noticed is that, of course, the chapter is written by more than just her, but she's the main author. So I just thought, like, where are these main ideas coming from? Because it doesn't really break down like so-and-so wrote this section, so-and-so wrote this section. So the first thing I wanted to know is what's her background? What makes her qualified to even write this section at all? So the first thing is in her LinkedIn, I looked at her experience. So her experience is interesting. She's never worked as an educator, ever. Not a single day in an official classroom.
Wow, really?
Not one day.
Like, so is that including, like, that's any type of educational setting? Like we're talking like higher ed and K through 12, none of that? She's never been in any of that, Starfish?
Nope.
Wow.
So that was very shocking to me, because even people who are presidents of a college teach classes in higher ed. Like, it's almost a requirement that you've at least
I would think so.
taught a class. It's like an unspoken rule that you really need to be in the classroom to really know what the F you're talking about. I mean, it happens. I do know some people who've never taught, but it's pretty rare. Especially as I entered more of the data world, there were fewer people who had actually taught, because these are data nerds and they're not teachers and stuff. But you work your way into higher education through, or a lot of education through adjunct instruction is what they call it. So you're an adjunct, you are part-time, you have no benefits, you get paid by the class. So you get a class that's assigned to you as an adjunct, and you really only need 18 credit hours to be able to teach a class in an area. You have to have 18 credit hours in that topical area. So I taught psychology. I had 18 credit hours, obviously, in my program, but I was able to start teaching before I even graduated with my master's degree. So they do have a minimum requirement of 18 hours. But I mean, you start teaching in these adjunct classes so that you can get to know people and you can understand the college that you want to work at, or any college. People just jump right into these adjunct roles all the time. Even when you're working full time, you still probably teach a class here or there. It's just a normal thing. We all did it. And so it's just appalling to me that she'd never been in the classroom once. Not only that, but she's never actually worked at any education institution. Never. Yeah. Okay. So here's her background.
Okay.
She started working at this place called Donor Town Square Inc. So this was in 2007 to 2008. It was for 1 year.
So
I can tell you it's,
how sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but
please.
like how old
No.
is she? Just out of
So
curiosity.
it's hard to tell because they don't have your name on or your age on here, but so you can kind of tell if I go down to her education. So if I go down to her education has a lot more credentials to it. She started at the at Hollins University with her Bachelor of Arts in Political Science in 2001. Now, I'm 44. I graduated high school in the late 90s, which means we're about the same age as her. If she started college in 2001, I ended college in 2003. So, or 5, because I took 5 years. So she's
Okay.
about our age. About our age.
Okay.
So she does actually have, so to kind of jump to the education section, since we're there, she has a Bachelor of Arts from Hollins University. I've never heard of Hollins, but there's a lot of
I haven't
little
either.
liberal
Right.
education.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's accredited, but I haven't looked at it. Then she went to the University of Virginia, which I know is accredited because it's a state school.
Right.
She got her Master of Teaching. And she put in here, it just says Master of Teaching Foreign Language Education. So I went to the University of Virginia. This is a thing that you can get a master degree in teaching, and that you could do like a foreign language education. So this lady was planning on being a foreign language teacher in a high school or something like that. Like, imagine your foreign language teacher. They taught like one class at 5 schools, because they're just running around. The Spanish teacher teaches at all the districts or whatever.
Right.
So that's what she went to school for. So there's a good chance that she spent time in the classroom as a student, but that doesn't count. We don't count that because you're just learning. You're not teaching anything. You might have been taught a lecture, graded some papers, but you're generally not the leader of the class. Then she did start her PhD from George Mason University, respectable school. She started her Doctor of Philosophy, her PhD in Education Policy and Research Methodology. So those are 2 separate areas. And so she, may have done what they call a cognate, where it's like a minor. You kind of choose your area. And it says on LinkedIn from 2018 to present. So she never went up there and updated when she actually got her PhD, which is sketchy, because why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
You're very proud of yourself. She's updated her page since 2018. So why not update that? That just sketches me out. Something about it.
Right.
I'm like,
yeah.
Why didn't you put that when you graduated on there? So what's interesting is when you look through her profiles on some of the job pages she has, it says, Lindsay Burke, PhD. And I'm like, are we sure she has her PhD?
I was going to say, so we know for sure, we'll just say for logistics, we know for sure she has her master's, and that's it, right?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
And that's it for sure. And on some of the pages she still sort of works at, it says she's getting her PhD. So she could be what's called ABD, all but dissertation. And that means she's done all of her coursework, but she never finished her dissertation. So
makes sense.
Kind of, some people are willing to hire you with that, as long as tell them I'm ABD, and they're like, fine, because not a lot of people finish their dissertations. Just that's a fact of life. But you still did all that coursework, and the dissertation is just one research project,
Exactly.
So I was just pretty surprised by that. She has some credentials in education, and if anything, in education, we value education, of course. So having a PhD or even starting a PhD makes her credentials okay, but the fact that she's never have actually taught in a classroom or worked at an educational institution makes me think, the hell, how on earth could you know anything about working in a school if you've never even fucking worked in one ever?
Yeah.
Not even
Yeah.
in administration, not even anything. The only experience
Right.
she has, so she's worked for all these places, one called Donors Town Square Inc. It says client rep. I don't know what she did there, but all of a sudden, boom, the Heritage Foundation hires her. She's been there
Okay.
for 16 years. She started as a
Wow.
research assistant in May of 2008, and she's been there ever
Wow.
since.
Wow.
And now she's the director for the Center for Education Policy, is what her job is. 7 years she's
Okay.
been doing it, almost 8. So she's the director of education at this think tank, but she has no experience in education. It's just bizarre. Also, have
Okay.
you ever heard of Glenn Youngkin?
No,
The
I have not.
he's the governor. He is the governor of Virginia, and he's a very controversial candidate because he like endorsed Trump and then didn't endorse. He doesn't really like Trump, but he's sort of um he doesn't, when Trump endorses somebody or doesn't endorse somebody, that it sort of wrecks their career forever. He's not like that.
Yeah.
For some reason he was like, I don't like Trump, and it didn't hurt him. He still stayed, but he's still like a wackadoo guy. He's kind of weird. He's got some
Okay.
weird ideas. He hates anything to do with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, anything, just cancel all that crap. And so the only role she does have in higher education is what's called the member of the board of visitors at George Mason University, but she was appointed to that job by Glenn Youngkin. So I'm like, well, this doesn't count. You didn't apply for a job and get it based on your credentials. You were appointed as a member of the board of visitors, which has very little authority other than, saying, sure, go ahead. It's very checkboxy, but that's her only experience in any kind of higher education.
Now, I'm
So
assuming that they're just looking for candidates like that in the Heritage Foundation, like they just want people that are gonna agree with and write all of this stuff for them, right? Like that, like their
yeah,
ideals. Like
toe the
they're
line.
looking for people. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so who knows where she got these values or whatever, but she's really big into like that school choice. And so that's what makes me think, oh, well, it's a religious thing. She's a religious person, and now she's bringing that into her job as
Right.
as an education director. She's saying, well, I'm a very religious person, and I believe that we should be able to have schools that are religious, and a choice. That's what they mean when they say
Right.
choice.
Yeah.
What I think of when we say choice is, so where I live is sort of a medium, middle, lower class part of the town, and so my taxes are lower, and so my schools are not as good. We all know that's right. My
Right.
mom lives on the other side of town, the wealthier side of town. Her taxes are higher. Those schools are better because of her taxes. So if we were really talking about school choice, what that means is that my kid, I could say, I don't want you to go here. I'm going to put you in a lottery to go to that school where the rich people pay for it. So do they really want the poor kids in their schools? No, they don't.
No,
They don't.
no, of course not. Yeah.
This isn't about school choice. And they're not going to send their rich kid over to my poor school because they want school choice. No. They want this so they can create religious institutions to, teach us their religion, which it's ironic that they consider us indoctrinating their kids when that's exactly what they're doing, pointing the finger at us. So I've just, she's really big on school choice, which was interesting to me. And again, I'm like, what do you know? What do you know about school choice? Like, why are you the expert in this? What do you know? You've never worked in a K-12 school in your life, and you want ed choice. I mean, I don't even know if she has kids or anything in school,
Right.
but still, it's just bizarre. It doesn't say she's a board member on her child's school program or anything like that, So she has a lot of articles out. She writes a lot. about this school choice issue, but it's all garbage. I mean, I'm surprised it's considered peer reviewed, really, because there's no data behind it. There's very little actual data. So in this chapter, for example, she's like, okay, so education, we all agree, and I think we do all agree on this, is not doing well.
Correct.
It's just not producing people that we want it to produce. We're bothered by the fact that it costs so much, and then when students actually come out of it, they seem kind of useless. I would for a better word. And that's not to
Right.
diss an entire I'm not like anti-Gen Z or anything. It's not like the younger generations, and I'm not like, oh, core math, that's a terrible thing, because I actually don't hate it, but this isn't the way to fix it, in my opinion.
Right.
Is to say,
Right.
well, screw it. Let's just make it so anybody can go anywhere. Let's just make our own schools. And so, I can't completely say that I disagree with that either, because if a public school is not suiting your needs, they're not producing, and there's objective data out there that shows the public schools in my area do not perform very well. And then there's these charter schools that are some of the best charter schools in the state. I'm like, well, obviously I'm not going to send my kid to the crappy public school. I'm going to send him to the charter school, which is technically still public because the public pays for it.
Right.
But it's not a religious school. So that's where the line is, I think.
We have a special announcement for all of our podcasting friends and aspiring creators out there. If you're looking to elevate your podcasting game, check out blueberry.com. With their top-notch services, you can take your podcast to the next level. Plus, we've got an exclusive offer just for our listeners. Use the code STARFISH at checkout to get a special discount on your subscription. Don't miss out on this great deal. Visit blueberry.com and use the code STARFISH today. So what I'm gathering is like she wrote this document to say that we want like religious schools, like religious private schools is what she's wanting. Is what Project 25, that's what they're saying.
Yeah, so in the mission it says, in our pluralistic society, families and students should be free to choose from a diverse set of school options and learning environments that best fit their needs. What a load. Our post-secondary institutions should also reflect such diversity, with room for not only traditional liberal arts colleges and research universities, but also faith-based institutions, career schools, military academies, and lifelong learning programs. So let me just say, as somebody who's worked in higher education institutions are not all traditional liberal arts colleges. Most institutions are public. They're not traditional liberal arts colleges. Let's just take some colleges here in Colorado. CU Boulder, CSU, UNC, all public schools. Metro State. Those are public post-secondary institutions, and they're not liberal arts colleges. Only two of them are, well, actually, I guess UNC probably is a research institution too. And I think Metro's trying to become one, but I don't know if they are one right now. They were a community college or 2-year for a long time, or just a 4-year college, right?
They were community. Now they're university. Yeah.
Right. They upgraded to offering like doctoral programs. So
yeah.
When they say career schools, what they're talking about is career and technical education. So that's like, if you think of like a plumber or
trade schools,
a mechanic, trade schools. Yeah. Education institutions offer career programs. I hate this argument. This argument makes me the most annoyed of all. There is an assumption that you go to a 4-year college like Metro, say, and that the only classes you can take there are psychology and women's studies. And no, that's not true. I don't know about Metro, but I do know that the community colleges offer career and technical programs in police, fire, healthcare, automotive, welding, plumbing. Plumbing is one of those interesting programs that you can't make into an education program because they already have such a strong apprenticeship program. And the higher education institutions are like, can we get in on this? Can we offer the apprenticeship? Like, how do we, so that they don't have to like go through a union or find, something like that. So
Yeah.
it just really bugs me that they don't think of, especially community colleges. Community colleges in Colorado, 100%, no doubt. There's no argument. They offer career freaking classes. Okay, you can become a welder going to Community College of Denver, and that's that. You can become an automotive technician going to Community College of Denver. So F you with this career school BS. It just ticks me off. So there's one thing.
Right.
That's wrong.
So this is just stuff that like she just pulled out of her butt, or like what?
Of course.
This is just stuff
they don't know.
Like that someone's telling her to put there. Like, I'm just wondering like how that.
I mean, I hear this argument a lot that like, you see these memes on Facebook and they're like, bring back the trade schools. And I'm like, you guys, they are there. They just changed their name. They changed their name in the 90s to get away from that trade school mentality, because people don't want their kids to become a plumber. That's just that. Okay. Let's just all be honest. Nobody's like, gosh, I really hope my kid becomes a plumber someday. Unless you're like freaking Mario Brothers and it runs your family.
I'm just saying, I mean, plumbers make a shit ton of money. I'm just saying.
They do. And you should become a plumber. Great job. I would never say, but for the most part, if we look at the problem, people think it's the schools that are pushing a liberal arts program on them, but it's not true. We actually push them into career and technical programs first because you can make money doing that right off the bat. If you want to just jump into accounting or bookkeeping or computers, here you go. Here's a certificate that's maybe, I think the smallest certificate they have in the state of Colorado is a 1-course program to become a CRN. Which is very, very minimal skills, like a minimal. You're basically babysitting. You're not giving any medicine or anything like that, right? You know what a CRN is, right? Am I right?
No.
Is this the right terminology?
A CNA, you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, certified nursing
CNA.
assistant. Yeah, certified nursing assistant. Yeah.
Where did I get that other acronym? I don't even know. But yes, CNA, exactly. That's one class. They actually offer it in high school because they're like, might as well give it to high school kids. And then they already have their CNA by the time they graduate,
Right, yeah.
So there's a lot. There's certificates in automotive. There's certificates in so many things. I can't even tell you. Dozens, because they wanted to make that more of an option for people to make money immediately. So trade schools are colleges. They're the same thing. And to diss on colleges like that they don't offer these programs it's just false. It's false. So they're pushing this narrative that get rid of these liberal arts schools. What's fun, the funnest part is that a lot of these career and technical programs require liberal arts classes like English and math. Because if you go talk to the police chief, he's like, why can't people write when they get out of your program? They know everything about being a cop, except they still don't know how to write and they don't know how to deal with people. So then we started adding like psychology courses and psychology in the workplace. And, it's like, that's the education part. Education is soft skills. These skills like being able to research, being able to think, being able to problem solve, critical thinking, problem solving, writing. Those are core critical educational competencies that most institutions expect you to have when you graduate, even if you get a trade school degree. So that's the liberal education they're talking about. And I don't know. I feel like they just don't want higher ed. They just don't want it. They just want you to go get a, quick training class and get into your job.
I mean,
and they have an argument against it for sure.
This is part of the 1% agenda that has been for centuries. We've been doing this for centuries as humanity. We want to keep the working class stupid, right? So then we can control them. Then the 1%. Well, I'm smarter than you because I'm a millionaire or a billionaire. So obviously I've more successful than you, have higher education than you. So we're going to dumb down your education so that you can't get to my level. That's what it is. It's all about being king of the castle. That's all
They
this
don't
is.
even want you to be educated. I think they would just be
Right.
happy if you worked on a farm and plumbed their house. That's what they want. They want you to
Yep.
be their slave, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. They
So
just want slave workers.
they do, and they would have it if they could. That was how we started, and that's what we walked away from. So yeah, education as an equalizer. I mean, I do see the argument of, okay, now we have a problem with money. And this is where I'm going to start to kind of move into one of the actual issues. So one of the issues in this document is that they want to take away financial aid from what's called accreditation. So you guys have heard accreditation, you told, go to an accredited school, right?
Right.
Well, an accredited school means that they go through this process, and the process is extremely difficult. It's very, very, it's not perfect, and it does not tell you whether that school is awesome. All it tells you is that it met the minimum requirements. There's no scale. And so that's where I think even us, like I've been through an accreditation audit, essentially. It's basically like an audit, and it's a peer review. And that's another thing people hate about it. It's almost like the police. We police ourselves internally. Okay. But
Yeah.
you're going to call out another school. So basically accreditation, there's regional accreditors in the United States, and they take over an area. So the one for the Midwest for Colorado is called the Higher Learning Commission. It's actually the biggest regional accreditor, HLC, we call it. And HLC will say, okay, you want to be accredited. Well, you have to tell us everything about every faculty you have. We have to make sure that you have some sort of way of making sure that they're actually qualified to teach these classes. Totally makes sense and fair. Yes, here you go. And then they want to make sure you're financially stable so that these students don't start a program and then halfway through it, your school closes. So another fair thing. What they have not been really focusing on, though, is did they learn anything? Did they learn? Is this a quality institution? So after, I remember during a visit when the peers came to the site that I was on, I've been through many of these, but one of them in particular just really stuck out to me, because afterwards I was sitting around talking with some of my friends and colleagues who worked at the institution, and they said, so how do we do? And I said, we passed. And they said, that's all it is? It is a pass fail thing, essentially. You're either accredited or you're not. Now you can be what they call on probation or on sanctioned, and that means, so here's where it comes in for these guys. So in order to get federal financial aid, so FAFSA, we fill out the FAFSA, we get our grants like our Pell grants and even loans or anything.
Yep.
You fill out the FAFSA. If you're an institution, if you want your students to be able to get FAFSA, you have to be accredited, or financial aid, you have to be accredited. So institutions that are not accredited, they rely on rich students to go there, essentially. They're like, well, we don't need to be accredited. We're good. Especially because these accreditors are starting to push like more equity and diversity activities. And so some of these institutions are saying, fine, forget it. We're not going to be accredited by them. We're going to go to another accreditor. So there's different accreditors, frankly. But if you want federal financial aid, you have to do this regional accreditation with HLC. So like CSU, UNC, they all have to go. CUDEN, they all have to go through this accreditation if you want to be able to get financial aid. So what these conservatives are saying is, let's decouple those two. Let's say you don't have to get accreditation in order to get financial aid. So what they're essentially saying is, let's still put students into debt. We don't care about that. We don't care if you get student loans and you take out way too much and you pay for a crappy education that won't get you anywhere with an unaccredited school. All we want is your money. We don't want to have to do this accreditation part. That's what they're saying. I mean, your face says it all. It's gross. They make this argument that why are they connected? We don't want to have to do all this diversity and equity crap. Well, I'm sorry, but the only way you're going to get federal money for your school is if you follow our rules. And that is a totally normal and expected thing, right? Like if you get a grant or if
Right.
you get money, there's conditions on it. You have to meet certain criteria in order to continue to get that money. And they want
Yeah.
that criteria gone.
Right.
So I was talking to a conservative person about this, and what they said was, well, yeah, we need to get rid of student loans. People are in debt. We need to get rid of for federal, forgiveness, student loan forgiveness. And I'm like, aha, you are associating accreditation with federal loan forgiveness. That's not the same thing. They're still gonna be in debt and need forgiveness if this plan goes through. They just don't want to have to be accountable for their actions. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not trying to be all great and amazing and stop this financial federal, like this, everybody having a loan and this big $1 trillion student loan problem. They're not trying to solve that. They're trying to solve, how do we get out of accountability and still get money? That's what they want. So I just think that's disgusting. Again, it's a way to still use federal money, by the way. There's no reduction in federal reduction in federal money coming in. That they don't want that. They just don't want to have to deal with the accreditation. So it says the essentially Congress established two primary responsibilities for the USDOA in this law to ensure the administrative capacity and financial responsibility. So I talked about that already. Like, do you guys have the ability to even run this thing? And to ensure the quality of those institutions. But they don't do a very good job of the quality part. They don't actually measure, are your students learning? Are they graduating? Are they getting good jobs? Are they gainfully employed? They're really not measuring that very well. It's pretty bad. We need to measure that. And I agree with them. We are not measuring whether, this is one reason I wanted to leave higher ed, is because they are measuring how many students are enrolled and how much money they get. They don't care whether you finish. They just want to get new people in the door, and they don't care whether you finish. Now, they try to care. They try to want to care. And this is the movement now, is to move toward, okay, we got the inputs coming in, we got the students coming in, although enrollment's dropping because people don't see the freaking value of higher ed anymore. I wonder why, because they don't give a shit if you finish. So, but they are shifting now toward, you must finish in order. And that was the gainful employment thing. If you recall, and with Barack Obama passed this gainful employment thing where for every program that you have that is career and technical, so those trade school programs. So if I have a student who's going through an accounting program at my community college, we have to prove that they actually got a job and earn money from that. And if we can't prove that, we have to look at that program and shut it down. They won't give you financial aid for it for a while. Now, there was a million problems with this thing, but it was a good attempt to at least force the education institutions to look at the graduation instead of just, look, we have 10,000 enrollments. We're amazing. That's what they look at now. They don't care about whether you finish.
Yeah, and that's pretty terrible. I mean, we know that education's in a dire state of hell. I mean, along with a lot of our other programs in this country, but it just doesn't sound like this plan is going to help any of that. It actually sounds like it's going to make it a lot worse for everybody. It sounds like, to me, it just sounds like an agenda to force people to basically, like, you have this forced education that is very conservative, may or may not teach you what you need. It's like they're just trying to get their housekeepers and their plumbers and their they just want their slave workers is what this sounds like, right? Like that's what they're doing. Like, we'll make it easy for people that want to work in these jobs and then not go any further with anything. Is that what I'm getting the gist of?
Yeah. I mean, of course they want lawyers and doctors too, but that's about it. The lawyers and doctors are acceptable, and then everybody else needs to go to trade school. No psychology degrees, no liberal arts degrees, nothing of that sort. We don't want
probably no fine arts, probably, right?
No,
No fine
no,
arts.
there should be no
Okay.
degrees in any of these things. If you can make a career at, if you can make a job at it. So here's what they want. They want it only if you can earn money from it. They don't want you to have to, they don't want you to have to go through school in order to make money, which I fundamentally agree with. You know, we all agree with that.
Sure.
Like, it
Right.
sucks to
Yeah.
have to go to school in order to earn money. And we've talked about that a lot ourselves in our own careers. Like, how are we going to make more money? We have to get more educated. Come on, we're already so educated and we have so much experience. 20 years of experience I have in higher education. You know, give me a break. What more education do you want? A doctorate is not going to tell you I'm a better candidate than than it is right now, right? I
Right.
teach at the doctoral level. I know, okay? So I think that part is very frustrating to me because yes, they do essentially only want those people, but of course they want their doctors and lawyers too, which is why they still support like Harvard. They still support Harvard
Okay.
because it's a private
Okay.
school. You have a bunch of rich kids going there, and they're
Right.
going to become our future
It's
doctors and lawyers.
yeah. So basically keep the 1% where they are. That's what
Yep.
I'm getting the gist of. We're going to keep, we don't want anyone coming from a different class over into our class. And this is the issue that I have just with the world in general. Like everything is
Mhm.
just outlined specifically towards the 1%.
It
Like
is. It is.
that's what causes all the problems in the world. Wars, oppression, dictatorship, all of it is driven by the 1%. And that is why I personally have such a problem with this document. Not, I know I've talked in other episodes about this show, The Handmaid's Tale. This really feels like that, very much so. That show was terrifying to me. I actually could not finish watching it. I couldn't stomach the scenes in that show. And I think it's because I realized that this is something that
Wow.
could really potentially happen in real life.
Oh yeah.
And that's what scared me
No.
the most about it. It was very eye-opening for me. And this document, if you're not terrified by it, as just a normal working American, I don't care. I don't give a shit what race you are, what gender you are, your background. You should be absolutely terrified of this proposal by the Republicans.
Yeah. 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 And I think what's pushing them over the edge with accreditation is that education is supposed to be this great equalizer because it does set you up for a career, but it also gives people the opportunity who would never have been educated to be educated. And that's where all this diversity and equity and inclusion stuff comes from. Now, I do want to spend a whole episode on diversity, equity, and inclusion as a government function. Um, and because I think they approach it the wrong way. As somebody who comes from a little bit of a change management background, telling people to their face they're racist when they are a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion activities, especially if they're white, it's just off-putting so much that it makes you go, I want to be part of this movement, but at the same time, your approach is so abrasive that I can't. It's hard to get past that initial hump of like, okay, I'm a racist, but in psychology we have these two different kinds of racists that are like covert and overt. Like, I'm not trying to be a racist. I'm not going around and, you know, attacking black runners in hoodies. I'm not actively putting, KKK signs on, like I'm not actively, and that's what people think of when they think of a racist is like a Klan member.
Right.
But really, when you're racist, all you are is somebody who's always thought a certain way because that's how society was set up. And you're not overtly racist, you're covertly racist. So you have these ideas in your mind that are probably wrong about other cultures and people. And so I get that, but I just think their approach has been so abrasive that that's why they've said we're cutting this off. But also, like, fundamentally, I mean, that's just their lame excuse. Like, you guys are just being rude about this. Don't call me a racist. That they don't want this DEI stuff in there. They don't want equality, equity, diversity, inclusion. They don't want it. I mean, look at Hitler, and I don't like comparing the GOP to the Hitler. I'm not saying they are. We could argue they are, but
Yeah.
But Mr. Hitler did not like disabled people. He said, and when I think of diversity, inclusion, equity, I think of inclusion and accessibility and people of disabilities, because that's my clan of people, you know. And
Right.
I think I don't want to not include somebody because they're have a disability, but Hitler did not think those people should be alive. He wanted to kill them. He wanted them out. And I think that's how a lot of people think of people with disabilities, is that they shouldn't deserve money. They should just die, basically. They're useless human beings. They're not going to help.
I mean,
It's terrible.
It's such a terrible like mentality that just really is, you know, like no empathy. And you look at people like Stephen Hawkins, okay? Muhammad Ali, okay? Like, let's talk about disabilities here. And so if you're going to cut people out like that, you could be cutting potentially a genius out of society, a champion.
Absolutely.
I just think that's a ridiculous mentality just because someone has a disability. That is disgusting, terrible humanity.
Yeah. And I mean, I've actually heard people say, like, oh, had I known this person, I would never would have hired them. And I'm like, oh, holy fuck. So,
I know.
It's
out there. It's out there. Yeah.
And they just think you're absolutely useless, and they think that there's something wrong with you, and you just needed a little accommodation, and suddenly, well, basically, sorry, we've discovered that you're needy and you're a leech on society, and we don't want you anymore.
Yeah, that's disgusting. Okay. Terrible.
So that's just a dip of the toes into the higher education section, into the education chapter. I mean, it's multiple chapters. It covers multiple things. But when I read that, I thought this is so transparent that it's not about getting them a good job, which they say. What baffles me is that the conservative movement they're not asking for the Title IV funding to end. They want that financial aid. They just want to not have to be accountable. And that was such an open door for me to go, this is a scary document that people who don't understand these things are going to go, yeah, let's end the DOE. Let's end accreditation, without really getting what that means, because it sounds like it makes sense. Like, if we want to tear down the federal government, let's get rid of an agency. And you can see in this how they sort of dole out all these pieces. Let's send this over here and this over here. But it's like, okay, you need to have this central body discussing what are we trying to accomplish here, education. We're not trying to accomplish getting you your money. What protects people from you? And they don't want that either. They don't want consumer protection agencies. And what's weird is that I just don't think every conservative thinks this way, but enough of them do about enough things that they become this homogenous body of just anger and hatred toward people that they don't think are valuable to them in any way. And I don't know. It just makes you want to cry a little bit.
It really does. It's like, if you don't make me money, then you're just absolutely useless to me. And I just want you killed or taken all of your rights away so that you have nothing. Like, I want you to have nothing so I can have everything mentality. And that's really the core of this. And this is the point that I'm going to continue with every single episode to drive home. Okay. Because the only way that we're going to get rid of this bullshit is with our votes and our voices. As soon as all of society stands up to these 1%ers, they're going to have no power over any of us. We have the power. They don't have the power. There's a few of them. There's hundreds of thousands of millions of us. Okay. So pretty easy to take down anyone in that scenario. I mean, I'm not calling for violence or anything, but
No.
I'm just saying there's other ways that we can take them down without violence.
Right. Take them down,
Yeah.
meaning take their power away,
Yeah, exactly.
Like I'm not advocating violence either. And I think that is very critical to make sure that we're not doing that. But I think our message is super clear that we have to read this and understand it for what it really is, not for what they're telling you it is, but for what, just really think who benefits. I often hear conservatives say, follow the money. Follow the money. They want their money without accountability. That's pretty obvious in this to me. What is the argument? The only thing that they really say is that accreditors essentially make it difficult to get financial aid if you don't 100% agree with all of their things. And that's not true. A lot of conservative schools would still do accreditation even if it weren't for all of this. But I think also what they forget is that they're program accreditation. So take healthcare, that's a perfect example, or even like fire.
Yeah.
They have external accrediting bodies anyway. Nobody wants to have a doctor, a nurse, a fireman who doesn't have standards by an accreditation body. So if you can get passed through this, so for fire, it's called IFSAC. For nursing, it's called ASCEN. Those are just two big accreditors. If you can't get through them, you probably aren't going to survive anyway as a program. Not a lot of programs survive without these accreditors anyway. And so
right.
If you can pass these accreditations, you can pass this regional one, not even a problem. Most of the time, there's still problems. It happens. It does. It's not like out of the question or anything, but
yeah,
it's just such a, again, it's like, do you understand accreditation? Have you actually talked to people? I don't know. It just doesn't feel like anybody works in higher ed the way they talk about this. I just feel like you don't know higher ed at all. And
right.
You just want your money. And that's the gist of this paragraph, this section. And so we will work through all of these issues and talk about how 100% benefits somebody monetarily. That's the goal of this. I think our podcast is to show that these 1%ers are just making themselves richer through this Project 2025. And that's the gist.
And I think that this is like the ultimate scam. This is the ultimate scam of the century. Like this story, this Project 2025, they are wanting to scam the American people. So be very careful with what you read and what you research, people. Because this stuff is terrifying. All of our other little fun stories that we did that only affected a few, this is like going to affect everybody. So that's why it is so important that we talk about this in particular. So
yeah, for sure. Well, that was another very fascinating topic that I could talk about endlessly, honestly.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. And
if you want all the nitty gritty details about accreditation, I'm your man. Well, man.
Yeah. And the next, we'll dive deeper the next episode into more of like the educational portion. Like I said, we're going to try to, every week, we're going to try to break down each of these sections and discuss it further. But anyway, thank you all for tuning in today. And please be safe and stay informed. Thanks, everyone, for listening to Real Talk. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen.